What does Seafair mean to you?
Well, to me, it's especially significant. I'm a fourth generation Seattleite. So I was raised that Seafair was the greatest thing of the year. As a child back then, 50s and 60s, there was two great weeks, Christmas and Seafair Week. And Seafair Week was way better than Christmas for me. And then I ended up getting in the sport and winning the race at times, crashing in the race, losing the race, broadcasting the race. So for me, it's a magical week in my life.
Still,
I mean, everything changes, and the sport has changed, and Seafair has changed, and the city has changed more than anything. And maybe the significance of Seafair wasn't what it was, but I think Seafair is doing a good job trying to evolve it and keep it, significant.
it seems to have an added significance this year with Gold Cup returning. You won that trophy 11 times. What does it mean to have the Gold Cup in this particular event?
Well, again, going back to change, if you go back to Seattle's history with the Gold Cup, it was brought here by a guy named Stan Sayers. So whoever won the Gold Cup won the opportunity to defend it on their home water. So he brought it here. And remember, we're talking, Kraken, no Mariners, no Seahawks. That was it. We were way out west in the wilderness. And I would say that Seafair probably brought Seattle more attention than it had ever had when the Gold Cup came here. I think in '85, when I won it here, it had more significance even than it does today. So I think we need to work hard at getting that significance and relativism back up because there's a lot of competition now.
Do you think you can get it up to that significance and relevance again?
Yes, I think we can. I think the sport has been neglectful in evolving it and keeping it relevant. And if you look at all the other major motorsports, NASCAR, IndyCar, even Formula One, they've changed. And mostly what they've done is they've gone to a spec vehicle. For example, Paul, if you wanted to race IndyCars, if you and I threw our money together and decided we're going to race IndyCars, we can have the same equipment delivered to our shop by UPS. We assemble it, we go racing. If you want to go unlimited hydroplane racing, good luck finding a turbine engine that was built in the 50s, was used to fight the Vietnam War. And then even if you find the engines, good luck finding the parts. So that's just ridiculous. And we actually, Bruce McCaw, myself, and a guy named Scott Atherton, who is the king of turnaround artists in the motorsport industry, worked for almost 2 years and had, I think, a great plan, but the sport didn't embrace it. And what we had is suppliers. We had an engine supplier, we had a hull supplier, propeller. So everybody would have had the same equipment. And it would have been so much easier to get into the sport. They really wanted nothing to do with it.
When you look at all the Gold Cups that you won, Chip, I'm going to ask you a loaded question because it's probably impossible for you to, but maybe not the most memorable, but was there one that stood out that was the most challenging and maybe the most rewarding?
Yeah, the first one. I think it's like anything in sports or maybe in life. Your first kiss, does anything ever equal that? And for me, it was Detroit in 1982. I had just replaced the great Bill Munsey. He was killed, and 9 months later, I'm in his hometown of Detroit, racing the Atlas van lines against the Budweiser, which hadn't been beat for years because of their bigger engine. And we were given no chance, and we won in this dramatic come-from-behind fashion. So I don't think anything can equal that. But winning here in '85, because I always win away in one Gold Cup. See, I only won one Gold Cup here, and that was in '85, the last time it was here. So being able to do it in front of friends and family and my old high school teachers. That was significant.
Yeah, that had to be special. I'm blown away at the loyalty of the fan base for hydros.
I think two things are true there. Number one, Seafair and hydroplane racing is part of our DNA. And what always gave me the greatest joy in being in the pits is seeing a grandfather or grandmother, a mother, father, and a child. And the grandfather and grandmother were talking about, the Miss Thriftway and, the slow-mo, and dad and mom were talking about, the circus or the Atlas van lines, and then the kid wants to go see the Home Street Bank boat. So it was generational. It was part of, I think it's probably what maybe old sports sounds like, Pittsburgh, the Steelers. That's all we had here. And on the other hand, I think the sport is taking that for granted. We can't continue to take that loyalty for granted. We truly have to look at the market today, look at the attention span, look at the environmental. We have to look at everything and make the sport relevant again.
So how does Lake Washington rank on the circuit?
In a word, it sucks. And I mean that in the best possible light. Most race courses, all water is susceptible to weather conditions. Wind, is going to make it rough, and the boats are basically airplanes, so it's going to make them fly. Or on a river, the river follows the topography of the bottom. And as a driver, you can adjust for those because they're known. You know where the hole is on the river. There's one in Madison that's famous. We know where it is. The wind, we can set the boat up for it. Seattle is unique that the wave action is artificial. Those wakes come off boats, both race boats and pleasure boats. There's no symmetry to them. It's not the wind taking in one direction or a hole that's there because of the river. Those wakes are coming in at a million different angles. So as a driver, you can't develop any rhythm. And as a crew, you don't know what to set the boat up for. So, and then you get the boat set up for, ideal water conditions. And then all of a sudden a bunch of boats start moving around and it's lumpy. So Seattle is a unique challenge, and I think it adds to actually the great competition that we've had here.
Yeah. I always thought Detroit was known as the roughest, but that's just an outsider looking in.
Well, I think Detroit's reputation being the roughest might be true, but it's predictable. We know as a driver what to deal with. Seattle, it's a guess every time, which makes it great.
Yeah, well, it's certainly entertaining. It has been for decades. Now that San Diego doesn't have a race this year, which is, when you first heard that was always kind of the wrap up of the circuit and the season. Yes. When you first heard they weren't going to have it, what was your reaction?
More sadness. I have a lot of sadness and some, maybe even some anger that the sport has been left to wither. It hasn't evolved with the world. It hasn't evolved with our culture, and especially hasn't evolved with the sporting culture. Seattle is the last race of the year. It's a 4-race series. And I think Bruce McCaw, myself, and Scott Atherton had a very good plan to move forward for the next generation. And it wasn't embraced at all. And I think that's neglect. I think the power in the sport, and the power rests solely with the owners. There is no other power. It's not like the NFL or the owners control the sport and always have. They've neglected it, and now we're to a 4-race series.
As a champion of the sport, are you even optimistic that this could get back to maybe the status it was?
I'm not optimistic unless you make changes. It's the old analogy. You can't keep rearranging the deck furniture on the Titanic and expect a change. And we had a plan, first of all, to build the prototype, to show the world this is the new vehicle. Have suppliers that were ready and anxious to be in the business of supplying the sport, such in NASCAR, such as in the IndyCar. And it could grow then I would be optimistic. But it's hard to be optimistic when they change nothing.
At this point in your life, this time of year, do you miss getting back in the cockpit?
That's a good question. I get asked that a lot. I don't miss getting back in the cockpit because I wake up every day knowing my aches and pains, and I know that's not going to be. What I truly miss is the relationships, my teammates especially. And that I can't duplicate in my life. That was a really unique part of my life where I was truly bonded with these people doing something very difficult and very dangerous. And I miss that. And when I daydream, I'm an old man now, so I do a lot of reminiscing. It's never about racing, ever. I never am dreaming about in the boat or this great move I made or how I outsmarted this guy. It's always about the wonderful characters and smart, hardworking, beautiful people I worked with. I miss that.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you one last question. What is a typical?
The first time I crashed was testing in the Squire shop. This is before belts, before canopies, nothing. And so in those days, when you did that, you died. Nobody survived. So the thing takes off, and I'm like, holy f. And I'm like, I'm dead. And I remember thinking, I think three things. One, so this is what it is like to die. This is the big moment. And then I remember it coming around and looking down at the lake, and the lake looked like it was coming up. It didn't feel like I was falling. It felt like I was stationary at the lake. And I was thinking, this is it. And then I remember we wore parachutes back then, and the parachute did its job because what it was designed, you had a static line. So when I got ejected out of the boat, it turned me around so I didn't go in neck first, so you didn't break your neck, and then it kept you from bouncing. Well, it did its job, but then I come to the surface, the boat's upside down right next to my chest, and I remember it was a day like today, Mount Rainier, and I'm like, either I'm dead and hell has a mountain just like Mount Rainier, or I survived this. And I couldn't believe it. And then I remember the next morning waking up in Harborview, and it takes you a second to, what am I doing? Where am I at? And I remember feeling the sheets and going, these are real sheets. I'm alive. And the nurse walked in with breakfast, and I went, and that's a real nurse, and she has breakfast. I felt so lucky. But it seemed I had tons of time to think. And I think it's like people talk about a car accident. It happens in slow motion. And then in the Budweiser crash you're talking about, the boat landed upside down, and the cockpit was collapsed to a degree. So I couldn't open either of the hatches to get out. And we have that oral nasal on, but it doesn't seal perfectly. So, and every time I took a breath, I was taking in water. So I had to use my tongue to kind of baffle and just go, just to get enough air to stay conscious. And that was horrible. And then an hour and a half later, they got the backup boat, and you're out there doing it again. Young and dumb. And that's the other thing, that now looking back, it's like, what was I thinking? I mean, today, that just sounds, I replaced 3 dead guys and 1 or 2 quadriplegics who died the week before in a boat. Jerry Banks in Seattle. I got a phone call Monday. Sure, I'll do it. Bill Munsey dies a few months later. I got a call, you want to replace Bill? Sure, I'll do it. Now I would go, no, why would I do that? And then a friend of mine, Eddie Lawson, who's one of the greatest motorcycle road racers of all time, world champion a number of times, and I saw him not too long ago, and he goes, hey man, do you miss it? I said, no, do you? And he goes, shit, no. He said, Sunday, I woke up and I flipped on the Spanish Grand Prix motorcycle road race. I flipped on the race and I plugged the coffee pot in and I hit brew, and I'm watching the race going, what was I thinking? But that just, something changes. something in your brain just goes, and I'm sure it's the same with everybody at a
Yeah,
certain
well,
age.
depending on what they do, right? But yeah.
Man, that's why they have young guys go to war, not us. We're gonna go. No, I'm not going. I'm not going there.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad you get to experience it again this summer, and we appreciate you giving us some time today.
Paul, it's always good to be with you.